Greetings all, I'm Aaron Mills and welcome back to the Riverdale Vlogs, a much delayed Riverdale Vlogs. Yeah, sorry about that. I had some, I know it's been about 2 weeks since the finale actually aired. And yes, I've watched it and watched it a couple of times, but I just had some personal things going on that I had to deal with before I could even think about recording anything. So instead of when it's aired, I'm taking advantage of the fact that Riverdale is now all available on Netflix. All of season 1 is now available streaming on Netflix in the US. Of course, if you're in Europe, you've already got it and have had it as each episode is aired. Anyway, so chapter 13, episode 13, season finale, The Sweet Hereafter. And honestly, a little underwhelming. I mean, I know it's all falling action now that we know who killed Jason and all that, and it's more dealing with the fallout, but really, aside from one or two things, I was actually kind of underwhelmed by this episode, because it mostly, you know, at this point you can tell the way it was written, this was not written as if it was going to be the final episode of the series and they didn't know if they were going to get renewed. By this point they already knew they were getting renewed. And so this entire episode, more or less, just sets up plot threads for season 2. And a lot of them just kind of, you know, whatever. Okay, so after starting off with one of the most god-awful puns ever committed to television, shame on you. Just shame on you, Riverdale. Shame on you for that. Pretty much, now that everybody knows what's going on, more or less, most of Riverdale, especially those on the north side of town, really just kind of want everything to go away, especially with Riverdale's 75th anniversary jubilee coming up. And that's not really sitting well with our cast of characters. Pretty much, as has been established, pretty much adults in Riverdale are awful. So, you know, the mayor is trying to shift all the blame onto the serpents, because as it turned out, as more investigation has come in, Cliff has not been doing dealing any drugs. The Blossom family business is not maple syrup, but drug smuggling, and it's actually been apparently heroin that's been coming into Riverdale and being distributed throughout. From Montreal. We all know who else does business in Montreal, don't we? And we also know that, you know, the Blossoms stopped paying money to the lodges for some reason. Do you think we're done with that plot line? Because I certainly don't. Especially since Hiram Lodge is getting out of prison and will be coming to Riverdale. So that should be interesting. So, yeah, but pretty much, most of the town is trying to more or less just forget everything happened. You know, it's like, okay, Jason got killed, Cliff did it, drugs are involved, case closed, let's move on. Because this is what Riverdale does, apparently, is it tries to bury its dirty laundry, and it never actually seems to work. Betty is not happy with this, of course, because she just feels like all the blame is being shifted to the serpents as a scapegoat, and specifically to F.P. Jones, which of course is having a lot of blowback on Jughead. And so Betty wants the truth, because she's just sick and tired of the secrets and the lies, because Riverdale is just she's seeing her own family as a microcosm of Riverdale in general, you know, because her family's back together and Polly's living at home and all that. So Betty decides she's going to write a story for the Register about how it's a witch hunt, that the serpents are being blamed unjustly, and there's still plenty more things to figure out, and you can't just blame the serpents and say, okay, moving on. No. Despite what the mayor wants, and apparently what the sheriff wants, because the sheriff tells FP that he wants names of the serpents who are dealing. FP naturally refuses to say anything, because that's how he rolls. And he pretty much also, but he does say that the serpents have only dealt dime bags of wheat. That's the furthest they go with what drugs they sell. So while the packages look similar, odds are that what was in those that the drugs that were in the car that got burned, that Jason was going to use for their getaway, might have been weed. Might have been something harder. Maybe Jason put some of that stuff in that. Maybe Jason put some of that stuff in the car, take it as evidence, and do some stuff try to take down his dad from a distance. Who knows? Anyway, Betty writes the article and she takes it to her parents, and her parents think it's the greatest thing she's ever written, but they're not going to let her publish it because, you know, everybody wants to move on. And apparently it's not just the police that are targeting the Serpents. Apparently there's been actual, you know, altercations between the citizens of Riverdale and members of the Serpents. So, yeah, but, you know, Betty goes against her parents and goes ahead and publishes it in the blue and gold. We'll get back to that in a minute. Meanwhile, Archie and Veronica have decided to become a thing, and they go and they do the responsible thing and tell Betty what happened, that's happened, and Betty says she's fine with it. And this time she seems to mean it, especially since she's currently involved with Jughead. So that seems to be going along just fine. And everything else. Speaking of Jughead, he's not exactly having an easy time of it. People are kind of looking at him weird because his dad was involved in all this. And it gets even worse when Archie and Jughead come home one day and find a woman from social services talking to Fred. And basically, you know, pretty much with Jughead's mom in Toledo and his dad in prison, well, Jughead's going into the system and pretty much... Jughead's mom is apparently overextended as far as financially concerned, so she can't support him, so she's out. FP's in jail, obviously he's out. And it turns out Fred is out because he can't really, with his financial troubles with his business, he's disqualified along with a DUI he apparently got while just after Mary left. So... yeah, so Fred cannot cannot become Jughead's legal guardian, so he gets set up with a foster home, with a foster family on the south side, with the catch that means that Jughead is in a different school district, which means he has to transfer to Southside High, which is apparently, you know, one of the bad schools. You know, the ones that are borderline prison, you know, in typical fashion. When we see Southside High, of course, the very first thing you see, oh look, metal detectors and graffiti everywhere. This is truly a hellhole. You know, as opposed to Riverdale High, which doesn't need metal detectors and is pristine and all that jazz, you know. It's just, it's so friggin' over the top, it's ridiculous. Anyway, so, and basically, Jughead's going to be at Southside High by the end of the week. And, you know, Archie doesn't think this is fair, and he's pissed off and he wants to do something and he really can't. We'll get to that in a little bit. As he says, I've been showing up all year, Dad. It's not helping. Which is kind of true, really, and been one of the flaws of this series. One of the biggest things is that Archie really hasn't had a lot to do. I mean, honestly, except for the last couple episodes, Archie hasn't even been involved in the whole murder investigation thing. He didn't really get invested. He was more into his music and all that and everything else. And I think this is largely because I'm pretty sure the Miss Grundy plotline has been outright abandoned at this point. I'm pretty sure that when the initial stuff came out and the backlash hit, there was a hasty rewrite. When the initial rumors and announcements about what was going on in the series came out and the backlash hit over the teacher-student relationship with Archie and Miss Grundy, I think they did a hasty rewrite and got rid of that plot line as fast as they possibly could. The problem is that if that was the case, then obviously that was meant to be Archie's big arc throughout most of the season. So as a result, Archie's kind of a supporting character in his own show. You know, some have criticized and said that's the problem, is that Archie's a character where things are done to him and he doesn't do much, unless it's to, you know, kind of ruin everything. As I've said, Archie's not a thinker, Archie is a doer, but he doesn't always think things through. So, yeah, that's kind of been... Archie has been a little underdeveloped, I mean, but Archie's always been underdeveloped. But yeah, that really is, I think, what happened. Is the Miss Grundy plotline was probably meant to run a lot longer initially until the backlash hit, and then it was like, crap, we got to tie this up and tie this up fast so we can move on and get to the stuff people care about, because obviously they don't like this. So, anyway, Archie goes to FP to try to, convince FP to go to do the lesser sentence or do something that he's worried about Jughead and he needs to know what's going on, and he should get the lesser sentence so he can be there for Jughead, and Jughead doesn't have to go live on the south side and go to a different school and all that. And FP says no. It's like he says the serpents will step up when it's time. They will. And in the meantime, you and Betty need to be looking out for Jughead, because he's going to try to pull away. He's going to try to isolate himself. Don't let him. Well, that proves to be easier said than done. But before we get into what happens at that, let's go to the next major bit, which was actually some of the more interesting stuff, surprisingly coming from Cheryl. Naturally, all is not well at the Blossom House, with half the family dead and, the name scandalized. Penelope's more or less just treating Cheryl like crap in her own grieving. She's kind of blaming Cheryl for everything. She's angry at Cliff. She's taking it out on Cheryl. After the funeral, she just says it should have been the largest funeral in Riverdale. Instead, it was like a pauper's funeral there. And then she sees Cheryl crying. She's like, why are you crying? You hated him. And, Cheryl just, like, don't talk like that. And just basically, and then Cheryl's mom says, maybe it should have been better. Maybe your father had the right idea. And this puts a seed in Cheryl's head. Because for everything else we see from Cheryl going forward, it's big red flag time. First off, she quits the River Vixens and turns leadership of them over to Veronica, even going so far as to give her HBIC shirt, which I'm sure you can figure out what that means and why the hell Riverdale High even allows her to wear that shirt as the leader of the River Vixens. I don't know. Later, Cheryl goes up to Jughead in the cafeteria and apologizes for beating on him when he tried to apologize to her in the last episode. And she gives him his spider brooch, telling him he can get a good price for it at any pawn shop. So, anybody who's familiar with the warning signs of suicide, you know where this is going. And we'll get in more with Cheryl here in a minute. Getting back to the other stuff. So, as mentioned, Hiram Lodge is coming back to Riverdale. Which means Hermione has to make a choice. And sadly, this is the point where if you didn't like her before, or if you liked her before, you're not going to like her now. Because Hermione makes it clear where the hell her loyalties lie. Basically, she tries to convince tells Fred that her and Hiram have talked and they want to buy him out of the Sodale development contract. So Fred says, make me an offer in writing and I will get back to you. And I will get back to you on that. Which they do. And later, Hermione asks Veronica if her and Archie are getting serious, and she says maybe. And she says, well, maybe you can talk to... Your father and I are trying to buy Fred out of the Sodale project. Maybe you can get Archie to talk to him. And Veronica says, oh, yes, I'll just use my sexual wiles on him to get him to do my bidding. Well, if you think you can have it under control. God, Mom, I was just kidding. So, So, once again, this series has gone out of its way to prove that Fred Andrews is the only decent adult in Riverdale. So, and then, of course, later, Fred tells Hermione that he's not going to take the offer and they're still going to be stuck with him. And pretty much Hermione's worried about that because, as she puts it, Fred and Hiram will not get along. Getting back to the Coopers for a second, the family's back together and all that. Polly's back home, and Polly starts wistfully wishing she could go back to school. And Betty decides to take her, and they're not going to tell her mom because, Alice has made improvements, but still the way she is. And while they're there, just after Cheryl tries to apologize to Jughead, actually in the middle while she's apologizing to Jughead, and Jughead and Veronica are trying to figure out what's going on, Kevin comes up and drags him off, which kind of interrupts Cheryl, which is going to be another nail in the coffin, if you'll pardon the pun. You know, basically Cheryl figuring that nobody cares if she lives or dies and all that. It kind of happens like that. Stuff just keeps getting interrupted, and it just stuff that Cheryl interprets as nobody caring. Her mom doesn't care, her supposed friends don't care about her, and so on. Anyway, somebody took massive offense at Betty's article and plastered a whole bunch of hard copies all over her locker and painted the words "Burn in Hell, Serpent Slut" with a little voodoo doll of Betty on there, and Betty's like ready to take it down, and Jughead stops her. It's like, it's just some jerk with red spray paint. It's like, I don't think that's paint. And it turned out to be pig's blood. And as Archie puts it, where the hell do you get pig's blood? And it's just one of those things. So later when Betty goes home, Polly got grilled by Alice and spilled everything. And yeah, that kind of shoots anybody's theories in the head that Polly's like some insidious mastermind. I personally think so. Anyway, I know there's a couple of more popular YouTubers who have the idea that Polly's like some hidden evil genius and has some agenda planned. I seriously doubt it. So, you know, Betty says she's still going to pursue it, and Alice isn't going to, you know, and challenges Alice to tell her the truth about the argument that she and her dad had on prom night back when they were teenagers and all that. Oh, backtracking a little bit. As a result of this, as a result of everything that happened and them more or less finding the evidence that proved Cliff killed Jason, Betty is asked to make a speech at the Jubilee, and Archie is asked to perform. Archie, you know, wants to perform one of his songs, which he wrote in tribute to his friends and everything that's been going on, and Josie shoots him down saying that the mayor's already approved a different song. But Josie has actually become a lot less prickly, shall we say. She's acknowledging, she's looked at Archie's song, she says he's getting better with each song that he plays, and, you know, she's not, and while she can't let him play, she's not going to let the group and him play his song, it's still pretty good. So Josie's become, you know, pretty nice of late, and more in tune with the Josie that we know. So yeah, after all this and everything that's happened, Jughead just decides to just go to Southside High and just rip the Band-Aid off and do it. So, you know, he doesn't show up at Riverdale High one day, calls Betty from a payphone for some reason, even though we know he has a cell phone. I don't know what the hell's going on with that, but whatever. So, yeah, Betty, so, you know, they find out he's at Southside High, and all they know is Southside High's reputation. So, Betty, Archie, and Veronica head out to Southside High to find Jughead, and as they're rushing out, we see, you know, Jughead in the cafeteria getting harassed by a couple of students. But no sooner do they all get to Southside High than they find that Jughead's actually made friends with them, and they're all laughing and having fun, and it's like, what are you guys doing here? So he's fitting in, which is an interesting twist. So, you know, Betty and Jughead have a conversation about how, you know, she still misses him and all that and everything else. Oh, God, I interrupted myself. I'm sorry. Let me backtrack a little bit again, back to Betty and her mom. So the next day, you know, so basically just Betty tells her mom that she's sick of the secrets and lies. She knows that her mom doesn't really approve of her seeing Jughead. And, you know, and she makes the case that, you know, asks her about the prom night, and Alice says it's none of her damn business, and she basically says, you know, Dad was keeping a secret that almost destroyed this family. How many are you keeping? And basically, Alice goes to Betty the next day and tells her what happened. And as it turns out, no, Alice did not, in fact, have an abortion. Instead, it was exactly what happened with Polly. Hal did get her pregnant, but rather than, you know, doing an abortion, she was the one. Alice went to the Sisters of Mercy and had the eldest Cooper sibling in secret, a brother that they don't know about, who they put up for adoption, and the family has not seen since. Will this become a plot thread in season 2? Probably, but how it's going to be implemented, who knows. So that's the big Cooper secret right there. So anyway, getting back to being at Southside High. While Betty and Jughead work out their stuff, Veronica gets a text from Cheryl saying she's going to go be with Jason, which immediately, again, yeah. So the four of them rush out to the river and get there just as Cheryl more or less breaks a hole in the ice, because once again it's still the middle of winter. Keep in mind that means since the series began at the beginning of the school year, which is probably late August, early September, all this stuff has only happened over the course of a couple of months. And we haven't seen Christmas or anything like that, so for all we know, this is like late October, early November, depending on where, you know, since Riverdale is apparently somewhere in the northern latitudes. So, anyway, so that's where we see Archie punching something and bloodying his knuckles, because he's literally punching through the ice trying to save Cheryl. And while Cheryl's underwater, she sees Jason's dead corpse reaching out for her. You know, I've seen people freak out about this, thinking that means Jason's a zombie and that's going to come in. I'm like, I don't think so. I think that was just a hallucination that Cheryl was having, brought on by hypothermia. But Archie manages to drag her out, do mouth-to-mouth on her, and rescue her. Veronica takes her home. So she can warm up. Hermione wonders what the hell Cheryl's doing in her house. And, you know, just basically, Veronica doesn't tell the whole story. She just says Cheryl had an accident, fell through the ice of the river, needs to warm up. And, you know, Cheryl's like, I'll just go home right after this. I'm sorry. I'll go home and just warm up and go home, and that's fine. And then Veronica goes to the Jubilee with Archie. Jughead, meanwhile, goes and talks to his dad in jail. You know, mentions that, yeah, Southside High is another high school, and his foster family seems nice, and everything else. So, and then, you know, FP says, all right, you just gotta remember when all this goes down, I gotta make up for a lot of bad stuff I did. Which he did. As mentioned, it's not just murder It's like he may not have killed Jason, but there's a lot of stuff he did involving it, which, you know, rack up a pretty hefty number of criminal offenses in and of themselves. So, at the Jubilee, Archie performs. Josie changes her mind after word gets around that Archie rescued Cheryl, and they perform Archie's song, which is like Mayor McCoy's first little moment. Her second moment, it happens when Betty gets up and gives her speech, and pretty much rather than the rah-rah Riverdale speech they were expecting, she points out that, you know, the South Side is just as much part of it and everything else, and, you know, and what happened to Jughead and Jughead Jones, you know, without him we wouldn't have known what happened to, probably wouldn't have found out what happened to Jason, and how do we reward him? We banish him, you know, because that's what we do in Riverdale when the truth gets too ugly to bear. And she basically calls the whole town out and says, we need to do better. And she gets an applause, whether it's legit applause, who knows. And we'll see what happens from there. So, after all that, Archie goes home with Veronica, and they get it on. Yeah, they get it on, and that's, there's very little left to say on that front, but yeah. Meanwhile, Jughead takes Betty back to the Jones trailer, which he's cleaned up, and they start to get it on, but get interrupted. I mean, seriously, it's like shirts off, Betty's in her bra, Jughead's got his hat off, it's getting hot and heavy, and then the door knocks, and Jughead's first reaction, is that your mom? Which was actually funny. It was actually a very funny bit. I thought that was actually kind of funny, especially since Betty's response was, well, who else would it be? And they open but Jughead, you know, pulls his shirt on, Betty hides, you know, tries to get herself together, and Jughead opens it up, and no, it's not Betty's mom, it's the Serpents. And even more still, we finally get a character that I know several of my friends have been waiting to see. Hot Dog, actually, is with the Serpents in this, and good on them for finally squeezing him in. Oh, and yes, for the record, finally, in this episode, Jughead eats a goddamn burger. Hooray! Hooray! Now maybe we can work on getting some of the other Jughead tropes going, okay? Thank you. Anyway, the Serpents, I guess it's FP's chief lieutenant, basically says, yeah, we heard that FP could have named names, but he didn't. Serpents take care of their own. We want you to know that no matter what happens, we'll have your back for as long as he's gone. And then comes the wrinkle. The Serpent lieutenant hands Jughead his own Serpent's jacket, which he puts on, much to Betty's dismay. So yeah, but things get even crazier, because Cheryl, oh my god, Penelope comes home from the Jubilee, presumably, asks where Cheryl is, realizes she smells something, goes into like, I don't know if it's the living room or the main hall or something. Anyway, Cheryl's standing there in front of a fireplace, holding a candelabra, dressed in the same white dress we saw her dressed in when she and Jason went out. And he says, what's that smell? Gasoline. I know how we can fix everything, how we can be purified. And Cheryl sets the goddamn house on fire. Cheryl's lost it. Big time, Cheryl's lost it. So, during the whole thing where we see, you know, after, you know, we see Archie and Veronica get it on, and we see Jughead put on the jacket, we cut to Thornhill, which is on goddamn fire. And, you know, Cheryl standing there looking proud of herself, and Penelope just screaming at her. I mean, it's all silence, and there's music playing over it, but wow. Yeah. And then to finish things off, Archie gets a text the next morning from his dad asking him to meet him at Pop's for breakfast. And as Archie puts it, this is when he wants to talk about something serious and awkward. And yeah, this is probably about me staying out all night. So, yeah, so Archie goes to Pop's, and his dad's waiting for him. He's like, morning, Casanova. So Fred knows what the hell's been going on. Fred knows that his son, you know, you know, if he wasn't a virgin before, which he wasn't, he is now. He isn't now. But so, anything like that. But before they can even get started talking, Archie goes to wash his hands, and he comes out, and there's a guy with a ski mask on, holding Pops at gunpoint, apparently trying to rob the place. Archie looks like he's about to do something, glances over his dad. His dad shakes his head. But Archie, being Archie, moves forward, and the guy pulls the gun on him, and then we see Fred move, and then we cut to the outside and hear a gunshot. And for a split second, we're not sure who's gotten shot, if anybody. But, yeah, then we get Jughead's final narration for the season, and we cut inside, and yeah, Fred's been shot. And that's where the episode ends. So, god damn it, you bastards. But, again, like I said, kind of underwhelming. You know, I know it's falling action and all that, and they want to set up stuff for the next season, but really, aside from that last bit and, you know, Cheryl losing her mind and burning the house down, really, I was kind of underwhelmed by this episode. It just seemed like the first real filler episode of the season, which is a bad thing when it's your finale. I mean, I know you want to set up stuff for the next season, but not really, yeah, just not really that great, in my opinion. An okay episode. I mean, I wasn't bored by it or anything, but I just didn't really care about a lot of the stuff that was going on. It's like, oh, the town's trying to bury everything. Whoop-de-doo. Betty's indignant. Whoop-de-doo. We've seen all this. So, yeah, it just felt like rather than trying to tie anything off, it was just setting things up for next season. And just setting up plot threads for stuff you're not even going to resolve for a few months just doesn't really make for good TV, in my opinion. So that said, that concludes Season 1 of Riverdale. I may or may not do one more vlog in this series for Season 1. Now the whole series on Netflix, I may binge watch it one weekend and do a overall kind of look and see how well things threaded together, how it all worked out or didn't work, what worked, what didn't, what got abandoned, what proved to be completely unnecessary? What was actually vital? Was there anything clever that they did that just kind of got lost in the shuffle while I've been doing these vlogs? So I might do that here in the next week or so. In the meantime, as far as Season 2 goes, because of the way this ended, I don't know if I will vlog Season 2 or not yet. I've got to see what the first episode of Season 2 does before I make that decision. So, until then, this has been the Riverdale Vlogs, and we may or may not see you in Season 2. Bye.